Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's 30 by 30 virtual Expo series. This is the last webinar in this series, but it is just the start of all the work we're all doing. So thank you all so much for being here today. I quickly want to go over a few pieces of housekeeping before we get started. This meeting is being recorded, and we will post today's webinar and all the others in this series to our website at californianature.ca.gov. If you have any questions during today's webinar, please submit them through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. That's the easiest way for us to see them come up. The chat is open for anyone who might be having technical issues, or if you'd like to share resources with each other. However, we'll only be pulling questions from the Q&A section, so please submit them there. My name is Jason John, and I'm the Science and Policy Lead for the Biodiversity and Habitat team at California Natural Resources Agency. Deputy Secretary Jennifer Norris is unable to attend today, but we're really excited for the two amazing speakers we have lined up for you all, and we can't wait to hear more about the work they and their teams are doing. I work for Jennifer Norris on the state's 30 by 30 initiative, and I'm excited to be part of the 30 by 30 partnership with all of you joining today. 30 by 30 is an international movement focused on conserving 30% of all lands and waters by the year 2030. Here in California, we've committed to this goal and released the Pathways to 30 by 30 strategy. You can learn more about this initiative by visiting our website, by downloading our Pathways to 30 by 30 strategy, or watching the plenary session from our 30 by 30 partnership kickoff event back in September. Links to both are being added into the chat now. Now, the 30 by 30 partnership is a movement focused on reaching the 30 by 30 goal by working together, learning from one another, and supporting each other. On September 28th, we hosted an event to kick off the partnership at the California Natural Resources Agency. The event was filled to capacity, as you can see from these pictures, and it was an amazing time. But we know that not everyone was able to be there in person. So we're hosting this virtual Expo series to bring that experience to everyone throughout the state. As part of the event, we had a community expo to help make connections with over 20 different agency partners, funders, and technical assistance providers. We're here today to keep building on that momentum and the connections that we made in September by continuing to learn from each other and work together. At the end of the day, the 30 by 30 partnership is about locally driven conservation. We're here to share information about some of the resources available to support the partnership from agencies throughout California. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Jim Karpiak from the Coachella Valley Mountains Conservancy and John Shelton from the San Joaquin River Conservancy. Jim and John are going to give a brief introduction of their programs, funding, and other resources that will advance 30 by 30. We'll then spend some time today addressing questions from you, our partners, who will help us to achieve the 30 by 30 goal. Again, if you have any questions throughout this webinar, please submit them through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. When possible, my team will also try to answer some of the questions as they come in. And with that, I would like to hand over the mic to Jim from the Coachella Valley Mountains Conservancy.
Good morning, everybody, from the sunny Coachella Valley. Coachella Valley Mountains Conservancy is one of 10 state conservancies. We're founded in 1991. We're a state agency. We have a very broad mission to protect the environmental, cultural, scenic, and recreational attributes of the Coachella Valley and its surrounding mountains. If we go to the next slide, you can see where we're located. There we go. For those of you who aren't familiar with Southern California, we're about 100+ miles east of LA, kind of in the center of the state. We have a pretty large territory, 1,500 square miles approximately. We stretch from the edge of the Inland Empire in Banning all the way down to include the top quarter or top third of the Salton Sea. We are bounded on the north by the Joshua Tree National Park and on the south by the Santa Rosa and the San Jacinto Mountains. As the map shows with the white labels there, we're fortunate enough to be at the confluence of several ecosystems. We're in the Sonoran or the Colorado Desert ourselves. To the north is the Mojave Desert, north and east, and to the west is the coastal range that separates us from LA. To the east are the peninsula ranges that stretch down to Baja California. And of course, at the bottom is the Salton Sea. The Whitewater River watershed runs from the coastal range down into the Salton Sea. So because of this, we can lose the slides now. I think there's no more to be discussed about that. We have a varied topography. We have low desert, we have high desert, we have mountains, we have canyons, we have mud hills, we have alluvial fans. We have even transitional areas which have both desert and alpine features as you get higher up into the mountains. Critically, we have a lot of endangered species that are unique to our area. Several are named after the area. We have the Coachella Valley fringe-tailed lizard, the Palm Springs pocket mouse, and so forth. So endangered species are something we're very proud of, and we work very hard to protect them. For the first 20 odd years of our existence, the Conservancy's focus was almost exclusively on acquisition of vacant, undeveloped land for the purposes of protecting the habitat of endangered species. We were involved in the development of the Coachella Valley Multiple Species Habitat Conservation Plan that protects 27 species. The goal is to balance conservation and development. For those of you not familiar with HCPs, they're essentially a binding agreement among local jurisdictions and critically the regulatory agencies that oversee environmental permitting for endangered species protection as to where development can occur and where conservation is to occur. And they facilitate development not only of housing and commercial things, but also public facilities such as highways and streets. So they're very helpful. We have used the priorities of the multiple species plan to guide our acquisitions. We've been very successful working with our partners. We have funded acquisition of about 109,000 acres. We have bond funding from the state. We do tend to work to leverage our funding so that we can use Section 6 money from the federal government or money from other state programs to make our bond funds go farther. Recently, in the last 5 or 6 years, we've gotten funding from Proposition 1 for watershed projects and from Proposition 68 for recreation projects. We've tried to use those in a way that complements our acquisition work, for example, by doing restoration, watershed restorations on land that's already been conserved, or doing recreational projects or interpretive signage on conservation land, trails, or things like that. 30 by 30 has come along at a really great time for us. It allows us to sort of implement a paradigm shift, if you will, in our acquisition program. So instead of the guiding principle being habitat conservation, we can add onto that looking for land that's important for recreation, looking for land that's culturally important to tribes and others in the community. We can factor in our acquisition planning, smart planning and reduction of sprawl. We're even beginning to work to acquire land that's previously been developed. For example, one of our partner agency, the Oswit Land Trust, just purchased a closed golf course and is going to convert that into a nature preserve that includes a wildlife corridor. So the ability of us to move forward and to change and expand our acquisition efforts, which are already quite successful, is really important to us. We have grant funding from several sources available for our partners and future partners. We're sort of taking 3 steps to implement 30 by 30. One is to work with our partners on new target lists of properties that we want to acquire. The second is to work with local cities and tribes in the county to sort of target our acquisition work in a way that doesn't compete with them as they need land for economic development or critically affordable housing in this community. And then finally, we're working with state agencies like the Wildlife Conservation Board to access other funds that are available. As most of you know, the state budget has been very generous in the past couple of years because of the surplus. And so there's a lot of funding available for conservation. So this is a good time to take advantage of that. Look forward to working on 30 by 30 over the next few years. And I'm happy to take questions during the question and answer period. Thanks.
Thank you so much. It's great to hear about the amazing work that you're all doing. We'll go and have some questions at the end, but how about John, if you could join us now, we'd love to hear about the work that you're doing with the San Joaquin River Conservancy.
Yeah, good morning to everybody. Jim kind of hit on some of this with the state conservancies. We are state agencies. We're all a little bit unique. There's quite a variety, and where Jim's area is relatively large, the San Joaquin River Conservancy is relatively small. Our area is along the San Joaquin River near the city of Fresno. We basically go from the Bryant Dam, the Millerton Reservoir, down to Highway 99, 23 miles. our original vision and goals when we were put together in the early 90s was to purchase property for ecosystem values, community access, and recreation, and then also education and other things like that. And then a big part of it was to develop a multi-use trail to go from one end to the other. And in the decades that have been going on, we've done a pretty good job of getting some of this up to, we're over 3,000 acres of our property. We've also helped out some of the local nonprofits purchase property. And we've worked with the city and the counties to get their things together and to get the Eaton Trail, which is our multi-purpose trail, put together. So under the 30 by 30, we are very interested, as Jim was saying, in leveraging funding. Most of our bond funds are now mostly obligated, but as referred to the last couple of years within the state budget, there's been additional general fund that's been sent our way. We have a couple of pieces of funding for that is going to be this fiscal year, next fiscal year, for a couple $1 million a piece, and one that we got for recreation access and climate resiliency about 1.5 years ago, that we have a pretty good idea for a project, but we have not yet encumbered that funding. So we have funding available, but we've also worked very, very hard to work with other funding programs to leverage their funding, work with them to not only work within our area, but to join our area with other areas. When you throw in some of the ideas that are going on in the San Joaquin Valley about groundwater sustainability act, some of the issues that have come along with that, and some of the other things that are going on, the ability now to purchase property and conserve it, I think is the day has come. There is a lot of opportunities out there. We're very interested in working not only within our area, but wherever we can to help facilitate it within other areas too. But we have a pretty good stakeholder group that is very interested in working on things. And we're very interested in kind of moving forward on this 30 by 30. My personal history with 30 by 30 is I've been involved with San Joaquin River conservation and the full valley for years. And I see this as a very good opportunity to tie things together along the river corridors, which of course that's our priority, is because we're along the San Joaquin River. But as mentioned under the Coachella Valley, there is a lot of very important ecosystem values as you follow the river system, especially as we connect the Sierras on down through the mid elevations down to the valley floor, and then hopefully all the way to the Delta. To be able to get that sort of ecological corridor put in place would be huge. We are very interested in doing our part, but we're also very interested in reaching out and helping where there's other possibilities to do things and tying things up together so that we can have one contiguous corridor. So with that, I think I'm going to leave it. I'll leave a lot of time for questions, and we'll go through from there.
Well, thank you so much, Sean. Jim, if you'd also like to come back and join us, we'll go ahead and take some questions. Just a reminder, if you do have any questions you'd like to share with us, please go ahead and use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll go ahead and pull them from there. To start off with, you both talked about kind of the conservancies and the roles that they played. Jim, maybe you can expand a little bit on kind of the role of the Conservancy within CNRA and kind of the context they sit within.
Well, as John mentioned, all the conservancies are different. There's 10 of us. They're formed at different times to preserve different, or conserve and preserve different aspects of the state, different parts of the state. And we each have, it's a little confusing, we each have different statutory authority, which gives us some different powers. And some of the conservancies that some of you have not heard of, maybe like us, but the Coastal Conservancy is pretty well known, the Sierra Nevada Conservancy and so forth. Not every part of the state has a conservancy. The Wildlife Conservation Board kind of fills in where there are no conservancies. But I guess I would say that generically the function of the conservancies is to be a local presence within a community or parts of the state that are environmentally significant. And we each have locally based boards, which have representation from the state. We each have staff in the community. So we're able to be more present, participate in community activities and planning, to know where property is that needs to be acquired, or where there are environmental attributes that need to be restored or conserved, that sort of thing. So, rather than state programs being administered from on high in the state capitol, which for us is about 500 miles away, we're here. But at the same token, we have the connections and the state funding that allows us to do more than a smaller local agency would do.
No, it's amazing. One of the best parts about this Expo series has been hearing about the work that you all are doing, because being so tied in with all of the work across the state, but having that local viewpoint on what's needed there and what's happening in the community is such an incredible resource and such an incredible thing. Speaking of John, in the San Joaquin River Conservancy, you're in a really interesting area there where there's a lot of different types of spaces around you. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of the region that you work in within the San Joaquin River Valley and the Central Valley, and kind of how the Conservancy fits in there?
Yeah, couple of the interesting things I'd already mentioned, how important river corridors are. I suspect everybody on the call understands that. But within the San Joaquin Valley, we also have had some of the highest levels of development, a lot of it for farming and other issues along our river corridors. So we've lost a lot of our wetlands, a lot of our floodplain habitats and riparian corridors. And so within the San Joaquin River Conservancies area, we have focused a lot of time and effort and funding on restoring some of the upland and riparian areas. And we're just getting into some pretty good sized work with one of our partners, the San Joaquin River Restoration Program, which is a state and federal program. They're working on salmon restoration and trying to reestablish the spring run salmon. And as all those that work with salmon know, they need the full river corridor. They need to get back out to the ocean as young and back up to the watershed as adults. So the idea of getting something there, getting it connected is huge. As also part of that, they need a well-functioning system up and down the system. So there's a lot of work to be done. Our specific area, we've got a lot of old gravel operations that it was made them available for purchase. There was some restoration that was done as part of the reclamation plans, but a lot of work to be done afterwards. But when you look at it, it very much ties in the full San Joaquin Valley on into the Delta issues and the big water issues of the state of California. We all realize that, yeah, some of our complexity with the water system is because of listed species and other commercially and ecologically important species. And the ability to make a functioning ecosystem up and down the watershed is huge in order to relax some of the regulatory issues that are at points of diversion or other areas. So when we look at our full program, we're just a small part of it. But as Jim already mentioned, we also bring in the local aspects. We have on our board county supervisors, a mayor and a city council person, and a couple of local districts. And in being able to do that, we're able to kind of gauge the feelings for the locals on how they want to work on this, but also do some education as we can see things that actually work. And I think that's one of the very important things that we need to explore as we move forward on this is the tie between, especially in our area, the California agriculture and the ecosystem. You'll talk to a lot of farmers who are very proud of the idea that they are environmentally conscious. They've done this for years, especially the family farmers. They're very interested in having a good quality of life. And a lot of that does mean you need a functioning ecosystem. So some of that's just an educational thing, but a whole lot of it is, let's show them things that work. And I think the conservancies have done that in a real big regard. And I think we've got opportunity to continue to do that as we move forward.
Absolutely. And that engagement with the communities there, with everyone working throughout it, is such a huge thing. As we've talked about throughout a lot of these different expos, the 30 by 30 is all about locally and community driven conservation. And the work that both your organizations are doing are really central to that and making that link on the ground. Jim, maybe I can ask you first, but I'd love to get both of your thoughts on this. For community members who want to get involved, whether it's learning more about projects that are already underway or trying to submit a project themselves or just being engaged with the work that you're doing, are there opportunities to connect with your team either on a project basis or engagement with the community? How would you recommend?
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, we have our monthly board meeting or bi-monthly board meetings, which are public. We also have websites, which is, you can contact us through that. We have a couple of RFPs out now, and you can look on our website for those that make funding available. And we're doing in conjunction with those RFPs, outreach both on Zoom and in communities. And so we make a practice of doing that. I mean, a part of our goal is to bring in new partners, new community-based organizations that we haven't worked with before. We've been pretty successful at doing that. One of the things that we're able to do with the funds for recreation is to reach out to communities that have been underserved by recreational amenities or access to the out of doors. And that's particularly important in economically disadvantaged communities. And a big portion of our territory consists of such communities. And I think with the help of the funding from the state over the past several years, but in particular the last 2 years, we've been really able to expand that. And I think made new connections, have new relationships, and we're anxious to continue that process. So feel free to contact us. And I think there's some information in one of the chats that shows you how to do that, but you can Google us and you'll find us.
No, absolutely. We can drop that information back into the chat as well. That is really great to hear. John, how about you? Talked a little bit about some of the work that you're doing with the community. Are there ways that people who haven't been engaged or that want to continue engagement that you'd recommend for working with your conservancy?
Yeah, so we have been quite fortunate that many of the sources of funding, the bond funds, the grants that we've been able to use and to send out into various projects have not been competitive sources. So we're able to work with most of the proponents of trying to put together projects, and we greatly appreciate when somebody comes up and says, "Hey, I've got an idea," and then we can work through them on that. We're one of the few conservancies that actually uses Wildlife Conservation Board to manage our grant funds for us. So we work directly with them to make sure that our process is all done above board and transparent. But at the same time, we're very interested in having people reach out, having the discussions, and then trying to put together a project. And it kind of goes back to what we mentioned earlier. We're very interested in building kind of the value added projects. So if we've got one thing going, a lot of times we'll say, well, what about if we also work with organization X, Y, or Z and add that to it? And kind of as examples, we have an access agreement and a memorandum of understanding with the Chaffee Zoo. And their herpetologists are very interested in working with us. And again, I mentioned we have a lot of old gravel operations, which mean we have a lot of old gravel ponds, which means we have a lot of turtles. And we have the Western pond turtle, which is our native, and then we have some of the introduced species around. They're very interested in working on things like that. But we have also, we've got one project that we're trying to fit together, and I've had a few discussions with some of the folks from Fresno State and others to try to figure out how to do land application of biomass that's coming out of the Sierra Nevadas. Especially like the Sierra Forest, Sierra National Forest is just above us in the watershed, and they've been doing fuel reduction and recovery from the big creek fire that they had a few years ago. And a lot of times, when they grind up wood and chip it up and other things, they have to send it hundreds of miles to be able to put it into some process that is relatively climate benign. And I say that because there are some instances where they just go and burn it. We're very interested in putting it into our soils and doing a project that will basically build up our soil nutrient values, but can also capture the carbon after, it's a slowing down of the carbon process, but allows us ecosystem values, but also does the carbon capture by slowing down the process. And it's one of these that I would love to see, doing both the academic work to figure out how well it works, but also doing the ecological work to see how well it benefits our wetlands and our riparian areas. So it's one of these processes that again, to be able to build with multi-partners and put something together is huge. And that's just one of the things we're kind of thinking of. There's other ideas out there, and we're very willing to talk to people. You can either get on our website. We also have a Facebook page that talks about a lot of our community work that's been going on. And the other thing I always point out to people, we love to go out in the field, or at least I do. So if you've got an idea or you just want to see and think about things that may be possible, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll try and figure out a way to have that discussion.
No, that is amazing. Thank you so much. We are just about out of time, but before we close out, Jim or John, do you have any last thoughts you would like to share for everyone? Jim?
No, I mean, thanks for being interested in the conservancies. We have a lot to offer, as John mentioned, and I think that we're always willing to learn. So hope to be in contact with all of you in the future.
John?
I don't know how to add to that. I mean, I ditto on all that to say, I think the conservancies are just a gold mine for being able to work within the state, but also within the regional issues. Our connections, as Jim mentioned already, to disadvantaged communities and other things, we a lot of times are some of the main contacts that we can have there because we're close to them. But we're also close to the state agency and resources agency. So definitely reach out to us and let's continue the conversation.
Well, on that note, I thank you both for sharing your contact information here. Hopefully everyone can see it. And thank you both so much for taking the time to join us and to talk with us today. And thank you to everyone who also joined us for joining our 30 by 30 virtual expo series and for all of your questions. If you do have any other additional questions about the resources or programs that we talked about, please reach out through the contact info here. The video will also be posted online at californianature.ca.gov. I know we didn't get to all of the questions, but for the questions that we did not get to, we are working on updating our frequently asked questions on the website at californianature.ca.gov, and we'll hopefully have it posted before the end of the year. And hopefully it'll be a lot of help also when that is up. And finally, this is actually our last webinar in the virtual expo series. It's been incredible to hear from so many amazing partners like Jim and like John and learn about the work you all are doing. If you missed any of these webinars, the recordings are now posted at californianature.ca.gov, and this one will be soon as well. And even though the series is coming to an end, this series and this entire year is really just the beginning of the 30 by 30 partnership. We can't achieve 30 by 30 without all of you and the hard work that you're doing in your communities across California. We're all so grateful to be partners with you, to get to work with you and to learn from each other. And we're excited for the work that we can accomplish together. I hope to see all of you again very soon. And until then, thank you so much again and take care.